So let's look at some of the errors and the failures that you would have in your make.com automation when you're building your make.com automation, and the safety nets and how you can fix or comb most of these errors or failures that you might have. So I have a list here that I wrote for each of them. For I think I have seven. We're going to be looking at seven today, but if you like this kind of video and you want me to do more, I would of course do for more. For right now, we're just going to do seven. The first one is going to be the repeated action failure. So what happens is that if someone fills your form twice, you send them the same welcome email twice because there was no system to double check, or because you didn't add a double check step in your automation that would double check if that email already exists in your database, meaning that you have already sent them that email, the welcome email before. So you did not have that step to do that. So that's why you are going to have that repeated action where someone the same person fills their form twice and they get the same identical email, welcome email. So what you can do as a safety net to fix this is to always have a step that checks to be sure that that email does not already exist in your database before it fires off the welcome email. So, and for you to be able to do this in your make.com, there are two ways you can use this. You can either use a filter. So what you can do is make it search your database, right? So you do your connection and everything, and pick your spreadsheet name. Say, this is just an example, right? So what you would do is, sorry, you just filter that the name or whatever ID you use. I would always say email. Use email because email is very unique for everyone. Comfort Joe can be 20 other people in the world, so you might not want to use their name, but what you might want to use is going to be their email. So just use their email as the key to filter your form or the responses that you get. So in this point, what is going to happen is that your speaker, sorry, or the email in this case, it's the text contents and is equal to the respondent's email at this stage. So what you want to do is check if that exists. So if you search it and it returns nothing, that means it does not exist, and you can proceed to send the email. But if it checks and something the name exists, you can just ignore that, right? So that could be that should be your double check step that you always had in all of your outreach emails, so it will not fire off the same email to the same person twice. So the second one would be the rent limiter or the anti-spam. And in this case, is if you're sending emails to people, and you have a lot of customers or a lot of people filling your form, and you have to send emails to them. So if you know that if you're sending like direct emails, you will get up to like 100 or 500 emails from the same domain at the same time. Your domain administrator, or your domain, and what's the word, um I'm trying to find that word, but anyways, your domain manager, someone, the company, like say Google or all of that, they might flag that email because the email, or blacklist that particular domain because it's sending so many emails at the same time. So they might begin to think that it's you are spamming people. So one fix that you might want to have for this one is going to be for you to add something called the sleep module. So if you come here and you do sleep, you're going to see this sleep module here. So what you want to do is make it sleep for some time. So it is important that you know that what you're doing here is in seconds. So between 1 second to 300 seconds is how long you can make your setup sleep for in Make, as of right now, as of when I'm making this video. But maybe in future they can expand that, but at least 1 to 300 seconds can be the difference that you need to for your emails to not be blacklisted and feel like it's a spam. So what you can do is set your delay here. And that way, when you're running every time, it will run one time, sleep for a minute before it runs again, before it runs again. So that way, it's not firing off 500 emails at the same time. It's giving you time, or it's giving you some time difference before it fires off again. So it doesn't appear to be a spam. So that could be your safety nets on how you can fix that. The third one would be, adding error handling. And this is one thing that is always very much emphasized when you're building automation. Always add error handling, so that in case your API is down, in case an automation stops or something, it does not stop. It does not just stop, and nobody knows about it, that it was not running. So it is important that you add an error handler. So to add your error handler, you would always right click on the particular module you want to report errors on. And for me, I would always say, the module that is prone to always triggering errors, like the ones that have APIs. So anytime they always, throw up errors when they are running. So what you would want to do is add a module. For example, if you have like a JSON module, API modules, or modules that use APIs to, sometimes the API might expire, or like OpenAI, your AI modules, or AI modules that sometimes your tokens might be exhausted or something like that. You might want to add error handlers for such kind of models that are prone to always throwing up errors, right? So what you would do in that module is just come here and right click, and you see error handler here. So you just come here and it will show you the different kinds of immediate error and handlers you can have. You can have break, commit, ignore, resume, fallback, either of these. But I personally don't really like to use all of either of these, especially if I'm building for a client, because if I tell it to, unless in some certain scenarios, right? So different scenarios require or call for different things. I personally like to use ignore if I don't really care for, say maybe I'm scraping a website, right? And I want to convert that website data. I'm scraping leads basically, and I want to convert all the lead into a spreadsheet. And so sometimes when it's getting the lead data, I might not get complete data. And so in that case, it might return an error that I didn't get complete data. So I wanted to ignore that lead, because if it does not have complete data for that lead, I don't think I need the lead, because I would not be able to reach out to the lead because I have incomplete data about the lead. So I would want it to ignore that lead and proceed with other leads. So it will just depend on the kind of like, I want to say, the way that your own system works will determine the kind of error handlers you're going to add for any module basically. So another kind of error handler that you can add are, every other thing from, Slack notifications to SMS to iOS notifications. There is a plethora of things you can do. If you come here and you add this Slack now, you can easily just send the message here. So anytime it has an error, it's going to send that message to you. You come here, you can see the error message here. So you can tell it to always send it to maybe a team or whoever on Slack. So every time that particular module runs into an error, it's just going to send the person a message on Slack so that the person can come look at it, right? So that could be another way to handle your errors, and that way you're always on top of all your errors, and you will not be, you will not have like what's the word? You will not have like dead, automations that you didn't even know paused, but you thought they were still running. So it is always important that you add error handlers, especially to those AI modules and all those kind of modules, because they tend to always, run into errors with tokens, APIs, assays, all those kind of things, right? The next one will be your, input validation and sanity check, just to kind of, format your data better when you are trying to send things like emails and the rest. So some things that you might consider is, if you're sending emails, maybe the name of the person that you have, the person spelled it with capital letter, like capital letter John. So of course you're not in an actual setting. If you're sending someone an email, you're not going to say hi I with John all caps. Like, you are not going to do that. So there is no reason to set your automation to do that. So what you can do is actually come and set a variable. And the beautiful thing about these things is that they have now added an AI module that can write these formulas for you if you don't know how to write them. So you can set a variable here, or like you can see in here, I have like the word that you might always want to do here. So you want to set, you want it to lower this or capitalize it or whatever. You can have this and it will format it better in your your email. So what you can now do is, or if you want this to be in your email, what you can do is, in your email module, when you're trying to send your email, like so, send an email. So in the body here, you can always add, the formatting, so that way it could be like hi, and then you just add something like this, so that way it will, lower the, the entire name. If people, if you notice that whenever people fill your form, they tend to use a mix of, format, or a mix of, cases. Of course, I mean, lower and uppercase, right? So you notice that they're always mixing up, the cases. So what you can do is add that to your hi. So here you can say hi, and then you now add this. Or alternatively, what I personally like to do is always set variable, but my own set variable is not always to mix this up. So you can always say hi, and then you can copy this, and you put it here. That could be, so every time you swap this, of course, for the person's first name, and so that way it would be better formatted in the person's email. Another thing would be, if you are setting, if you are if somebody when you're filling the form, you're asking them for their full name. So they are presenting you with come for Joe, and you want to split it when you, and of course, you should split it when you are trying to mail them. So there is no need to say, hi, come for Joe. Nobody actually does that. So what you might want to do is set a variable. So one thing that you can do in here, I'm going to add another module here. Of course, whatever I'm doing here does not make sense. So you cannot look at it in collection. You have to look at it individually as I'm walking through, this safety net. So what you can do here is set a variable in this case. And then you can call this first name. And so what you're going to come here and do, one beautiful thing is that an AI module has been added now. So what you can tell the AI module to do is split first name from full name. So it's going to generate the formula for you. So you can see it, and you just have to apply this and you can save this. So that way, every time it runs through, it will only split and get the first name. So when you now come here to your content here, you're just going to get first name here, and that's what you want to do. Only the first name. So now if someone fills a form and they give you their full name, you can come here and split it and then use only their first name in the email or in the follow-up that you're trying to do with them, because of course you're not going to be calling them high comfort Joe. That doesn't make sense. So as another safety net that you want to explore, always make sure that you format, especially the outreach email, always make sure that it's formatted properly. And another thing that I like to do when it comes to email is to always send it as an HTML, not a plain text, because that if you send it as a plain text, it's going to be like jam-packed together, and nobody actually types like that, right? So you always have to send it as an HTML. And another thing is, if you're using AI to get the HTML, always make sure that it gives you an actual HTML. So always tell the AI to return it as an HTML, so that way you can feed it into your system as so. So always make sure that you give your email, that whatever you put in your email is an HTML, so that way it will be better formatted in your recipient inbox, so it will not be like jam packed together and all of that. Okay, so now number 5 is going to be the when you are making a tweak to the system. So one thing that a lot of people like to do is a system that is already running, you are going to go into that system that is running and make tweak to it, and then you might end up with a system that now just suddenly breaks. So one thing you might want to do is always export a JSON. So what you can do is come here and export these blueprints. So you export the blueprints and then re-import it into a fresh setup, and then you make the updates there. So if that one is not working, you can pause the original one and start running with the new updated one, instead of always going back into the existing one that is already running and making changes that might end up cutting the entire setup, and you might not be able to proceed. You might not be able to continue using that particular setup, or you have to pause it for some time. So imagine if you have an active sorry so imagine if you have an active system and you actually are supposed to follow up on leads, and then you have to pause it for an entire day, all because you went to make one changes in it and then the entire system just fell apart. So always export your blueprints, import it into a new setup, and make the updates there. If that once that one is looking good, pause the previous one and start running the new one. That way nobody would even notice that there was a change, right? So that's another thing, safety nets that you would, always have to explore. The next one is sentiment analysis. So, as much as, some people claim that, sometimes AI is not as good, with response and all of that. Whenever you are maybe watching out for emails and, having, a system that responds or follows up on leads once they respond, you should also integrate an AI module that will, analyze the sentiment, right? Because, of course, ideally, if someone says, oh, if someone responds to your email and be like, I don't want to get a message from you again, and then in your own setup, the response there is, oh, okay, let me book your meeting, or let's talk about it. So, of course, ideally, that would not be the response that you would give to someone if you were reading that email. So, always include like an AI module that will analyze the sentiment around that before it can go ahead to send your structured email, and make sure that it aligns to whatever response that the person got. So, that one is just like, yes, so they basically just always use like GPTs, whatever, to analyze, any incoming email, and then so that way your follow-up message would match or tally with whatever they responded to you. And the last one is, of course, the notifications. So these notifications actually, I don't think I've heard anybody say this. talk about this. Make.com now has a way you can send notifications to your devices, your iPhones, your what's it called, your iPhone, your Android, and whatever. So you just have simply have to come in here and then go to the iOS. So you do iOS here. You're going to see send a push notification here. So that way you can choose your device. You just have to connect your iOS to your setup on your, to your make.com or whoever's make.com. I personally always connect it to my client's make.com because I might not have like access to their emails to receive notifications and all of that. So I will just connect it my phone to their to their setup, so that way anytime their setup runs into an error, I'll be notified. So one thing, I just update your message, your body here. So whatever, whenever this thing happens, you just get a push notification, like a message comes into your iPhone, and so that you can go in and look at it. So always make sure that you build automations, and sorry, you include notifications and all of that in your automation. So just in case it fails, just in case it needs your attention, just in case you have to go in and update something, it will always notify you whenever such things comes up. So yeah, I think that's what I basically just have here. So if you have any questions around errors that you've ever encountered with your make.com, you can drop it in the comments, and I would do well and try to respond to them. And yeah, if you want to build automation for your business, and you might want to send me a DM on LinkedIn, I'll respond to all of them. And that being said, if you enjoyed this video and you want me to do more more safety nets and more error fixes, just let me know in the comments. And for today, I think that will be the end for us, so I'm calling it a wrap. So I will see you in my next one.